Chapter 21. How they continued to see the above-mentioned signs and tokens, and others that were even more hopeful, which gave them some comfort. At sunrise on Monday, October 1st, a pelican flew over the ship, and 2 hours before noon came two more. The direction of the wind was now east to west. In the morning of that day, the pilot of the Admiral's flagship said they were 578 leagues west of Faro, and the Admiral put the figure at 584. But from his secret reckoning, he knew they had traveled 707 leagues, a difference of 129 between his count and the pilot's. The reckonings of the other two ships varied even more widely. In the afternoon of the Wednesday following, the Niña's pilot claimed they had sailed 540 leagues, while the Pinta's set the figure at 634. Allowing for the distance they had covered the past 3 days, their reckonings still fell far short of the true and reasonable total, for they had always sailed with stiff wind at their backs. But the Admiral dissembled this air, that his people might not grow even more frightened, finding themselves so far from home. Next day, October 2nd, they saw many fish and caught a small tunny. They also saw a white bird like a seagull and many pardelas. The seaweed was now withered and almost reduced to powder. Next day, seeing no birds save some pardelas, the men feared they unknowingly had passed between some islands, for they thought the great multitude of birds they had seen were birds of passage bound from one island to another. The Admiral's people wished to turn off in one or another direction to look for those lands, but he refused because he feared to lose the fair wind that was carrying him due west, along what he believed to be the best and most certain route to the Indies. Besides, he reflected that he would lose respect and credit for his voyage if he beat aimlessly about from place to place, looking for lands whose position he had claimed to know most accurately. Because of this refusal, the men were on the point of mutiny, grumbling and plotting against him. But God was pleased to assist him with new signs. For on Thursday, October 4th, they saw a flight of more than 40 pardelas and 2 pelicans, which came so near the ships that a grummet hit one with a stone. They had previously seen another bird like a rabo de junco and one resembling a seagull, and many flying fish fell into the ships. Next day, another rabo de junco flew over the ship, and a pelican came from the west. Many pardelas were seen. At daybreak of the Sunday following, October 7th, they saw what appeared to be land lying westward, but since it was indistinct, none wished to claim having made the discovery, not for fear of being shamed if proved wrong, but for fear of losing the 10,000 miravedi promised by the Catholic sovereigns to the first person sighting land, in order to prevent men from crying, "Land! Land!" at every moment, and causing unjustified feelings of joy. The Admiral had ordered that one who claimed to have seen land and did not make good on his claim in the space of 3 days would lose the reward even if afterwards he should actually see it. Being warned of this, none of the people on the Admiral's ship dared cry out, "Land! Land!" But the Niña, which was a better sailor and so ranged ahead, fired a gun and broke out flags as a sign that she had sighted land. But the farther they sailed, the more that their spirits fell, until at last that illusion of land faded clean away. God, however, was pleased to offer them some small comfort, for they saw many large flocks of birds, more varied in kind than those they had seen before, and others of small land birds which were flying from the west to the southwest in search of food. Being now a great distance from Spain, and convinced that small birds would not fly far from land, the Admiral changed course from west to southwest, noting, in his journal, Piquet, that he was making a slight deviation from his main course in imitation of the Portuguese, who had made most of their discoveries by attending to the flights of birds. He did this especially because the birds they saw were flying in almost the very same direction where he always expected land to be found. He reminded the men that he had often told them they must not expect to strike land until they had sailed 750 leagues west of the Canaries. He had also said that the island of Hispaniola, then called Chipango, would be found in that area. He would doubtless have found it too had he not accepted the truth of the report that that island extended from north to south, and so did not run far enough south to hit it. As a result, Hispaniola and the other Caribbean islands now lay on his left, to the south, whither those birds were flying. Being then so near land, they saw a great abundance and variety of birds. On Monday, October 8th, there came to the ship 12 varicolored birds of the kind that sing in the fields. After flying for a while about the ship, they continued on their way. The other ships also sighted many birds flying to the southwest, and that night they saw many large birds and flocks of small birds that came from the north and flew after the rest. They also saw many tunny fish, and in the morning they saw a garheo, a pelican, ducks, and little birds that flew in the same direction as the others. They noted that the air was as fresh and fragrant as in April in Seville. But by this time the men's anxiety and desire to sight land had reached such a pitch that no sign of any kind would satisfy them. And though on Wednesday, October 10th, they saw birds passing overhead both night and day, they did not cease to complain, nor the admiral to reprove them for their small spirit, telling them that for better or worse they must go through with the enterprise of the Indies on which the Catholic sovereigns had sent them. Chapter 22. How the admiral sighted the first land, this being an island in the archipelago called the Bahamas. Our Lord, perceiving how difficult was the admiral's situation because of his many opponents, was pleased on the afternoon of Thursday, October 11th, to give them clear indications that they were near land, which cheered the men greatly. First, the flagship's people saw a green branch pass near the ship, and later, a large green fish of the kind that is found near reefs. Then, the Pinta's people saw a cane and a stick, and they fished up another stick, skillfully carved, a small board, and an abundance of weeds of the kind that grow on the shore. The Nina's crew saw other signs of that same kind, as well as a thorn branch loaded with red berries that seemed to be freshly cut. These signs, and his own reasoning, convinced the admiral that land must be near. That night, therefore, after they had sung the Hail Mary, as seamen are accustomed to do at nightfall, he spoke to the men of the favor that our Lord had shown them, by conducting them so safely and prosperously with fair winds and a clear course, and by comforting them with signs that daily grew more abundant. And he prayed them to be very watchful that night, reminding them that in the first article of the instructions issued to each ship at the Canaries, he had given orders to do no night sailing after reaching a point 700 leagues from those islands, but that the great desire of all to see land had decided him to sail on that night. They must make amends for this temerity by keeping a sharp lookout, for he was most confident that land was near, and to him who first sighted it, he would give a velvet doublet in addition to the annuity for life of 10,000 meravedi that their highnesses had promised. That same night, about 2 hours before midnight, as the admiral stood on the stern castle, he saw a light. But he says it was so uncertain a thing that he dared not announce it was land. He called Pedro Gutierrez, a butler to the king, and asked him if he saw that light. He replied that he did. So they called Rodrigo Sanchez of Segovia to have a look, but he was too slow in coming to the place from which the light could be seen. After that, they saw it only once or twice. This made them think it might be a light or torch belonging to fishermen or travelers who alternately raised and lowered it, or perhaps were going from house to house, for the light appeared and disappeared so quickly that few believed it to be a sign of land. Being now very watchful, they held on their course until about 2 hours after midnight, when the Pinta, a speedy sailor that ranged far ahead, fired the signal for land. A sailor named Rodrigo de Triana first sighted it while they were still 2 leagues away. It was not he who received the grant of 10,000 meravedi from the Catholic sovereigns, however, but the admiral, who had first seen the light amid the darkness, signifying the spiritual light with which he was to illuminate those parts. Land being now very near, all the ship's people impatiently awaited for the coming of day, thinking the time endless till they could enjoy what they had so long desired. Chapter 23. How the admiral went ashore and took possession of the land in the name of the Catholic sovereigns. At daybreak, they saw an island, about 15 leagues in length, very level, full of green trees, and abounding in springs, with a large lake in the middle, and inhabited by a multitude of people who hastened to the shore, astounded and marveling at the sight of the ships, which they took for animals. These people could hardly wait to see what sort of things the ships were. The Christians were no less eager to know what manner of people they had to do with. Their wishes were soon satisfied, for as soon as they had cast anchor, the admiral went ashore with an armed boat, displaying the royal standard. The captains of the other 2 ships did the same in their boats, with the banner of the expedition, on which was depicted a green cross with an F on one side, and crowns in honor of Ferdinand and Isabella on the other. After all had rendered thanks to our Lord, kneeling on the ground and kissing it with tears of joy for his great favor to them, the admiral arose and gave this island the name San Salvador. Then, in the presence of the many natives assembled there, he took possession of it in the name of the Catholic sovereigns with appropriate ceremony and words. The Christians forthwith accepted him as admiral and viceroy, and swore obedience to him as the representative of their highnesses with such show of pleasure and joy as so great a victory deserved. And they begged his pardon for the injuries that through fear and little faith they had done him. Many Indians assembled to watch this celebration and rejoicing, and the admiral, perceiving they were a gentle, peaceful, and very simple people, gave them little red caps and glass beads which they hung about their necks, together with other trifles that they cherished as if they were precious stones of great price. Chapter 24. of the condition and customs of those people and what the admiral saw on that island. The admiral having returned to his boats, the Indians followed him thither, and even to the ships, some swimming and others paddling in their canoes. They brought parrots, skeins of woven cotton, darts, and other things which they exchanged for glass beads, hawks' bells, and other trifles. Being a people of primitive simplicity, they all went about as naked as their mothers bore them, and a woman who was there wore no more clothes than the men. They were all young, not above 30 years of age and of good stature. Their hair was straight, thick, very black, and short, that is, cut above the ears, though some let it grow down to their shoulders and tied it about their heads with a stout cord so that it looked like a woman's tress. They had handsome features, spoiled somewhat by their unpleasantly broad foreheads. They were of middle stature, well-formed, and sturdy, with olive-colored skins that gave them the appearance of Canary Islanders or sunburned peasants. Some were painted black, others white, and still others red. Some painted only the face, others the whole body, and others only the eyes or nose. They had no arms like ours, nor knew thereof, for when the Christians showed them a naked sword, they foolishly grasped it by the blade, and cut themselves. Nor have they anything of iron, for their darts are sticks with sharpened points that they harden in the fire, arming the end with a fish's tooth instead of an iron point. Some Indians had scars left by wounds on their bodies. Asked by signs what had caused them, they replied also by signs that the natives of other islands came on raids to capture them, and they had received their wounds in defending themselves. They appeared fluent in speech and intelligent, easily repeating words that they had once heard. The only animals of any kind on the island were parrots, which they brought with the things mentioned above for barter. This traffic continued till nightfall. Next morning, October 13th, many of these people came to the beach and paddled to the ships in their little boats called canoes. These are made from the bole of a tree hollowed out like a trough, all in one piece. The larger ones hold 40 to 45 persons. The smaller ones are of all sizes, down to one holding but a single man. The Indians row with paddles, like baker's peels or those used in dressing hemp, but their paddles are not attached to the sides of the boat as ours are. They dip them in the water and pull back with a strong stroke. So light and skillfully made are these canoes that if one overturns, the Indian rowers immediately begin to swim and right it, and shake the canoe from side to side like a weaver's shuttle until it is more than half empty, bailing out the rest of the water with gourds that they carry for this purpose. That day, they brought the same things to barter as the previous day, giving all they had in exchange for some trifle. They had no jewels or metal objects except some gold pendants which they wear hanging from a hole made through the nostrils. Asked whence came that gold, they replied by signs, from the south, where lived a king who had many tiles and vessels of gold. They added that to the south and southwest there were many other islands and large countries. Being very eager to obtain our things and having nothing more to give in exchange, they picked up anything they could lay their hands on as soon as they came aboard. Were it only a piece of broken crockery or part of a glazed bowl, then jumped into the sea and swam ashore with it. And if they brought anything, they were willing to give all they had for some trifle or for a piece of broken glass. Some of them gave 16 skeins of cotton for 3 Portuguese blancas. These skeins weighed more than 25 pounds apiece, and the cotton was very well spun. They passed the day in this traffic, going home in the afternoon. It may be observed that their liberal terms in this trade did not arise from the great material value they placed upon our things, but from the fact they were ours, for they were convinced our men had come from heaven, and therefore they wished to have some relic of them. Chapter 25. How the Admiral left that island, and went in search of others. Next Sunday, October 14th, the Admiral went with his boats along the shore of that island toward the northwest to see what lay on the other side. There he found a large bay, or harbor, capable of holding all the ships in Christendom. The natives, seeing him go by, ran along the shore, crying out, offering him food, and calling others to see the men who had come from heaven. They prostrated themselves and raised their hands as if giving thanks for the Christians' coming. Many swam or paddled in their canoes to the boats to ask by signs if our men had come from heaven and to invite them to come ashore to rest. The Admiral gave them all glass beads and pins and took infinite pleasure in the simplicity of these people. At last he came to a peninsula, which would have taken 3 days of hard rowing to round. It was habitable and offered an excellent site for a fort. He saw 6 Indian huts surrounded by many gardens that were as beautiful as those of Castile in May. But the men were now weary of rowing, and the Admiral could see that this was not the land he sought, nor did it offer such promise of riches as to hold him there any longer. Accordingly, having taken 7 Indians to serve him as interpreters, he returned to his ships. From there he sailed toward other islands that could be seen from the peninsula, and appeared to be level, green, and thickly inhabited, as was confirmed by the Indians themselves. One of these islands, which was 7 leagues distant, he reached the next day, Monday, October 15th, and named Santa Maria de la Concepcion. The part of the island that faces San Salvador extends 5 leagues from north to south, but the admiral sailed down the coast that runs from east to west and is more than 10 leagues long. Casting anchor at the western end of the island, he went ashore to do what he had done on San Salvador. The natives came up quickly to see the Christians and appeared as much surprised as the others. Finding nothing new on this island, the next day, Tuesday, the admiral sailed 8 leagues westward to a much larger island and anchored on its coast, which extended more than 28 leagues from northwest to southeast. This island too was level and had a fine beach. The admiral decided to name it Fernandina. Before reaching this island, in the island of Concepcion, they picked up a man in a small canoe who had a piece of the native bread, a gourd filled with water, a lump of earth resembling vermilion, which the natives used to paint their bodies, and some dried leaves which they greatly prized for their fragrance and healthful quality. In a little basket he carried a string of green glass beads and 2 blancas. From this they concluded that he came from San Salvador, and after stopping at Concepcion was bound for Fernandina to spread the news of the coming of the Christians throughout those islands. As the way was long, and he weary, he paddled up to one of the ships and together with his canoe was taken aboard. He had a friendly reception from the admiral, who sent him ashore as soon as they reached Fernandina in order that he might spread his tidings. The admiral also gave him some trifles to distribute among the other natives. This Indian's favorable account of the Christians caused the people of Fernandina to come to the ships in their canoes to barter as the others had done, for these people and all the rest are of the same condition and customs. When the boat was sent ashore for water, the Indians very gladly showed them where to find it and carried the filled casks to the tuns in the boat. They seemed more intelligent and shrewder than the first natives our men had met, driving harder bargains for what they traded. In their huts, they had cotton cloths, which they used for bed coverings. The women covered their private parts, some with small clouts of woven cotton, others with wrapped skirts of woven cloth. Among the remarkable things the Christians saw on the island were some trees that bore on a single trunk 4 or 5 different kinds of leaves and branches, differing as much as the leaf of the cane from that of the mastic tree. The leaves seemed not to have been grafted, but to have grown naturally. They also saw fish of different shapes and fine colors, but found no land animals except lizards and an occasional snake. With a view to learning more about the island, they sailed to the northwest and anchored at the mouth of a beautiful harbor, at whose entrance lay a small island. But they could not enter this harbor because it was not deep enough, nor did they try to enter it because they wanted to stay near a village that was close by. Although this was the largest island they'd yet come to, the village consisted of only 12 or 15 huts, shaped like tents and containing no ornament or furniture, other than the things the Indians brought to the ships for barter. The beds were nets that had the shape of slings, with the ends attached to 2 house posts. They also saw dogs that looked like mastiffs or hunting dogs, but could not bark. Chapter 26. How the Admiral sailed to other islands that could be seen from where he was. Finding nothing of importance on Fernandina on Friday, October 19th, they proceeded to another island, called Sao Mateo, which the Admiral named Isabella. He did this to follow a proper order in the assignment of names. He named the first island, called by the Indians Guanahani, San Salvador, in honor of God, who had pointed it out to him and saved him from many dangers. The second, Santa Maria de la Concepcion, out of devotion to Our Lady, and because she is the principal patroness of Christians. The third, which the Indians called ... Benjamin Key notes that there is a lacuna in the Italian text. Fernandina, in honor of the Catholic king. The fourth, Isabella, in honor of the most serene Queen Isabella. And the island that he next found, Cuba, he named Juana in memory of Prince Juan, heir apparent to the throne of Castile. Thus he aimed to honor both the spiritual and temporal powers. However, he says that in goodness, extent, and beauty, Fernandina far surpassed the other islands. Not only did it abound in springs and beautiful meadows and trees, among which were many aloes, but it had mountains and hills which the others lacked, being very level. Charmed by the beauty of this island, the admiral decided to take possession of it, and went ashore at some meadows as lovely and pleasant as those of Spain in April. They heard the song of nightingales and other small birds, a song so sweet that the admiral could not tear himself away. These birds flitted among the trees and flew through the air in such swarms that they obscured the sun. Most of them were very different from ours, however. That country has many streams and lakes, and near one of these they saw a serpent 7 feet long and a foot wide in the middle. Our men pursued the serpent into the lake, which was very shallow, and there they killed it with pikes, though its ferocity and ugliness frightened and surprised them. In due time, however, they came to think it a delicacy, for it is the choicest food the Indians have, and once that horrible skin and scales are removed, the flesh is found to be very white, soft, and tasty. The Indians call it iguana. As it was now late, and they wished to learn more about that country, they left the serpent's body there until next day, when they killed another like it. And journeying through that country, they came to a village whose inhabitants fled before them, taking what household goods they could. The admiral would not permit his men to take anything they had left, that the Indians might not regard the Christians as thieves, and also that the Indians might lose their fear and willingly come to the ships to barter their things as the others had done. Chapter 27. How the admiral discovered the island of Cuba and what he found there. Having penetrated the secrets of that island of Isabella and learned the manners and conditions of its people, the admiral would not waste any more time in cruising among those islands, which were very numerous, and by the testimony of the Indians, resembled each other. He therefore took advantage of a fair wind to sail south toward a very large country called Cuba, that the Indians praised highly. He reached its northern coast on Sunday, October 28th. This island soon proved to be better and richer than the others they had visited because of the beauty of its hills and mountains, the variety of its trees, its extensive plains, and the great expanse of its coast and beaches. In order to gain some knowledge of its people, the admiral anchored in a large river where the trees were very large and tall, with fruit and flowers differing from our own and a multitude of birds. A most delightful place it was, for the grasses were tall and very different from ours. They recognized purslane, wheat, and the like, but the varieties were strange to them. Going up to two huts that they sighted a short distance away, they found that the people had fled for fear, leaving nets and all of their other fishing tackle and a dog who could not bark. The admiral ordered his men not to touch anything, for he was interested only in learning what things the Indians used for their livelihood and service. Returning to the ships, the admiral steered northward and came to another large river, which he named the Rio de Maras. It was superior to the other in that a ship could get up its mouth and its shores were thickly populated. At sight of the ships, the natives fled to the mountains, which were high, round, and covered with trees and pleasant greenery. There the Indians hid all they could take with them, as the timidity of these people kept them from getting information about this island, and he reflected that a landing in force would only frighten them still more. The admiral decided to send an embassy consisting of 2 Christians, an Indian he had brought from San Salvador, and a local Indian who had ventured to paddle to the ships in a small canoe. He ordered them to go up country and gain all the information they could, treating the Indians they should meet in a friendly manner. In order not to lose time in their absence, he ordered the ships laid ashore and caulked. They discovered that the wood with which they were feeding the fire for this purpose was of the mastic tree, which abounds throughout that country. The leaves and fruit of this tree resembled those of the lentiscus, but it is a much bigger tree than the lentiscus. Chapter 28. How the 2 Christians returned, and the account they gave of what they had seen. On November 5th, the ships having meantime been repaired and made ready to sail, the 2 Christians and the Indians returned. They said that they had gone 12 leagues into the interior and reached a village of 50 large wooden huts, thatched with palms and shaped like tents or pavilions, just as the others had been. There must have been as many as 1,000 families in that village because all of the people of the same kindred lived in a single house. The principal men of that country came out to meet them and carried them on their shoulders to the village, where they lodged them in the principal house. They seated each in a chair made of one piece and in a strange shape, for it resembled some short-legged animal, with a tail as broad as the seat of the chair and lifted up for convenience to lean against. This chair had a head in front with eyes and ears of gold. They called these seats dujos, or duchos. Having seated our men upon them, all the Indians sat down around them and then came up one by one to kiss their hands and feet, believing they came from heaven. The Indians also gave them some cooked roots that had the flavor of chestnuts. They earnestly prayed the Christians to stay with them, or at least to tarry 5 or 6 days among them, for the 2 Indians they had brought as interpreters spoke very well of them. Soon after, many women came in to see them, and the men went out. These women showed the same wonder and reverence, kissing the hands and feet of the Christians as if they were sacred, and offering them the presents they had brought. When it was time for them to return to the ships, many Indians wished to accompany them, but our men would permit only the king, his son, and 1 servant to go with them. The admiral received these people very honorably. The Christians related how, both coming and going, they came to many villages where they had the same friendly and hospitable reception. None of these villages contained more than 5 huts. On the way, they met many people who carried a firebrand to light certain herbs, the smoke of which they inhale, and also to make a fire to roast those roots of which they had given the Christians to eat, and which are their principal food. The Christians also saw an infinite variety of trees and plants, such as had not been seen on the coast, and a great variety of birds that differed from ours, though there were partridges and nightingales among them. The only four-legged animals they saw were some of those dogs that do not bark. They also saw much land planted to the roots mentioned above, to kidney beans, to some kind of horse beans, and to a grain resembling panic grass that they call maize and is most tasty boiled, roasted, or ground into flour. Our people saw a great quantity of cotton made into skeins, and in one house alone they found more than 12,500 pounds of woven cotton. The Indians do not plant it by hand, for it grows wild in the fields like roses, and the plants open up by themselves when ripe, though not all at the same time. On one plant they saw a tiny bud, another had just opened, and another was fully ripe and ready to fall. The Indians brought a great quantity of this cotton to the ships, giving a basketful for a leather thong. They make no use of it for clothing, but use it rather to make their nets and beds, which they call hammocks, and also to weave the clouts with which their women cover their private parts. Asked if they had any gold, pearls, or spices, they indicated by signs that there was an abundance of all those things to the east in a land called Bohio, which they also called Babik. We do not yet know for certain to what place they referred. Chapter 29. How the Admiral left off following the western coast of Cuba and turned eastward toward Hispaniola. Told of this, the Admiral decided to leave the Rio de Maris and ordered some of the people of that island made captives, for he intended to take some persons from each island to Spain in order that they might give information about their country. So the Christians seized 12 persons, men, women, and children, who came so peacefully that at sailing time the husband of a woman, who had been taken aboard with her 2 children, came up in a canoe and asked by signs to be taken also to Castile that he might not be separated from them. This favor the Admiral willingly granted, and he ordered that they should all be well treated. That day, November 13th, he stood eastward for the island called Babik, or Bohio. But a strong north wind forced him to anchor again on the coast of Cuba among some very high islands near a great harbor, which he named Puerto del Príncipe. The islands he named El Mar de Nuestra Señora. These islands were so numerous and close together that less than a quarter league separated one from another. The channels were so deep and the shores so adorned with trees and greenery that it was most pleasant to sail down them. Among the many trees that differed from ours were many mastic and aloe trees, palm trees with smooth green trunks, and a variety of other plants. These islands were uninhabited, but the Christians found signs of many fires left by fishermen. As we have since learned, bands of Indians come from Cuba in their canoes to these islands, and many others that are uninhabited. They feed on fish, birds, crabs, and many other things that they find on them. For the Indians are accustomed to eat such loathsome things as large fat spiders, white worms that breed in rotten wood, and other decayed objects. Frequently having caught a fish, they eat it almost raw, plucking out the eyes to eat before roasting the rest. They eat many such things that would not only sicken, but kill us if we ate them. They hunt and fish according to the season, going first to one island and then to another, like a person who changes his diet when it begins to pall. On one of the islands of the Mar de Nuestra Señora, the Christians killed with their swords an animal like a badger. In the sea they found much mother of pearl. Among the fish they caught in their nets was one like a pig, covered with a very hard skin. Its only soft spot was the tail. They also noted that in the sea and on its islands, the tide rose and fell much more than in the other places where they had been. Consequently, the tide was the reverse of ours here in Spain. For there, when the moon bore southwest by south, it was low tide. Chapter 30. How the Admiral again sailed eastward for Hispaniola and how one of his ships left him. Monday, November 19th, the Admiral departed from the Puerto de Príncipe in the Mar de Nuestra Señora in Cuba, steering for the islands of Babik and Hispaniola. But the wind proving contrary, he had to beat about 3 days between the island of Isabela, which the Indians called Sao Mateo, and Puerto de Príncipe, which lies almost due south about 25 leagues from both places. In these waters, he found long streamers of weed, such as he had found before in the ocean. He observed that they moved longitudinally with the current and not across it. Wednesday, November 21st, Martin Alonso Pinzon, having been told by some Indians aboard his ship that there was much gold on the island of Bohio, which was the name they gave to Hispaniola, was moved by greed to separate from the Admiral without the excuse of contrary wind or any other cause, for with the wind at his back he could have followed the Admiral if he chose. Instead, his ship being a smart sailor, he drew farther and farther away, until by nightfall he had completely vanished from sight. The Admiral was thus left with only 2 ships, and as the wind was unfavorable to go to Hispaniola, he returned to Cuba and anchored in a harbor not far from Puerto de Príncipe that he named Santa Catarina, in order to take on wood and water. In this harbor, by a river where they were getting fresh water, he found some stones with indications of gold. In this region, they also found pines so tall that they would serve as masts for ships and carracks, or as wood for planking, plentiful enough to make as many ships as desired. Evergreen oaks and madrono trees and other trees like those of Spain grew there as well. But the admiral, observing that all the Indians directed him to go to Español, continued on a southeastward course 10 or 12 leagues farther down the coast through a region abounding in excellent harbors and numerous large rivers. The admiral speaks so glowingly of the beauty of this region that I have thought it well to set down his very words concerning the entrance to a river that empties into a harbor that he named Puerto Santo. He writes as follows: "When I went with the boats southward along the mouth of the harbor, I found a river that a galley could easily enter. So hidden was the entrance that it could be seen only from close by. The river's beauty moved me to go upstream, if only a boat's length. I found it had a depth of 5 to 8 fathoms. I proceeded a considerable distance up the river, for I was charmed by the beauty and luxuriant foliage of this river, and its pellucid water, through which even the sandy bottom could be seen. I was also taken by the multitude of palm trees of different kinds, the tallest and most beautiful I had yet seen, and by the infinite number of other large and verdant trees. The little birds and the verdure of the fields tempted me to stay there forever. This country, most serene princess, is of such marvelous beauty that it surpasses all others as the day surpasses the night. That is why I have often said to my men that despite my best efforts to give your highnesses a perfect account of it, my tongue could not tell the whole truth, nor my pen describe it truly. I was so astounded at the sight of so much beauty that I know not how to express myself. For in telling of other regions, I wrote all that could be said about their trees and fruits, their plants, harbors, and all their other features, and all affirmed a more beautiful region could not be found. But now I fall silent, only desiring that others may come and show how much better than myself they can describe this most excellent place." Going on with the boats, the admiral saw among the trees of this harbor a canoe drawn up on shore under a thatched boathouse. It was made from the bole of a single tree, and was as large as a fusta, with 12 benches. In some huts nearby, they found a cake of wax and a man's skull in 2 baskets, hanging from a post. Later, they found the same thing in another hut, which made them believe the skull must be that of the ancestor of the family. But they could find no people from whom they could learn anything, for as soon as the Indians saw the Christians, they fled from their homes to the other side of the harbor. Afterwards, our men found another canoe, over 63 feet long, holding 150 persons and made like the aforementioned one.